There is a diesel engine bolted to the floor of a 40-year-old trawler right now that has been running longer than some of the folks watching this have been alive. It has never once seen the inside of a dealership. It has never been plugged into a laptop. Nobody has ever charged it $400 just to read a fault code off it. And it will still be thumping away at 7 knots long after the shiny new boat tied up across the dock is sitting in a yard on stands waiting on a part that ships from a factory an ocean away. That right there is the thing nobody at the boat show wants to say out loud. The engine was never the part that was going to break you. Most of the trawlers built in the 70s and 80s came off the line with one of a small handful of diesels that were, for all practical purposes, immortal. Slow turning, naturally aspirated, all mechanical. The kind of motor a man can pull apart on a shopping manual and a fresh pot of coffee and have running again by supper. Those engines outlive the people who buy them. I do not mean that as a figure of speech. The boat gets sold 2 or 3 times over 30 years, and the same lump of iron in the bilge just keeps turning. But here is where good people get hurt. Not every diesel in an old trawler is one of the good ones. There are 2 engines in particular that ended up in a fair number of these boats, and they are the exact opposite of immortal. They look fine on the dock, they fire up on the button at the walkthrough, and they will quietly bleed your retirement down to the bare studs. So this is 5 trawler engines that will outlive the owner, counted right up to the one I would buy a whole boat around before I ever looked twice at the hull. And then the 2 engines that will leave you stranded 100 miles from the nearest mechanic with your wallet wide open. Stay with me to the end, because by the time we are done, you will be able to lift an engine room hatch, look down at what is sitting there, and know in about 10 seconds whether you are staring at a 30-year friend or a $30,000 mistake. Before I name a single one, you need the rule, because the rule matters a whole lot more than the badge cast into the valve cover. 3 things make a marine diesel last damn near forever, and every one of them is about what the engine does not have. The first is no turbocharger. A naturally aspirated engine breathes on its own. It makes its power easy and lazy, never straining, never running hot. A turbo crams more air in so a small engine can punch above its weight, and that is wonderful right up until the turbo lets go, the seals cook, and you are buying a part that costs more than half the boats on this list. The second is no computer. A mechanical engine has an injection pump driven by gears and a governor full of springs and weights. It has no sensors to lie to it, no software to corrupt, no module that bricks itself after an update the dealer charges you to install. You can fix a mechanical engine with hand tools and your eyes. You cannot fix a fault code with a screwdriver. The third is it turns slow. A trawler engine that loafs along at 1800 revolutions a minute is barely working. The pistons travel a fraction of the distance a high-revving motor covers in the same lifetime. Low stress, low heat, low wear. That is the whole secret to an engine that runs for 15,000 hours and still does not smoke. Keep those 3 in your head, because every engine I am about to praise has all 3, and both engines I warn you about break at least one of them. Right. Let me start the count. Number 5. The Perkins 4-cylinder, the 236. If the trawler world had a workhorse, this would be it, and the reason is a number most people never hear. Perkins built somewhere north of 2 million of these diesels. 2 million. They went into tractors, into generators, into forklifts, into farm machinery in every corner of the world. And when a company builds 2 million of anything, 2 things happen. The bugs get worked out, and the parts never ever run dry. Walk into a diesel shop in any town on the map and say you need a gasket or an injector for a Perkins 4236, and the fellow behind the counter will have it on the shelf or in his hand by morning. It is a tractor engine at heart, and I mean that as the highest compliment I can pay a motor. Cast iron block, mechanical injection, naturally aspirated in the versions you want, slow turning, and built so a working man could service it in a muddy field. You will find these in CHB trawlers, in older Grand Banks, in all sorts of Taiwanese boats from the golden era. They are not glamorous. They do not make a soul-stirring noise. They just start, run, and ask for almost nothing in return but clean oil and clean fuel. Find one with records and you have bought yourself decades. That is why it opens the list. Number 4. The Detroit Diesel 671. Now this one is going to split the room, and I do not care, because this engine has earned its place by sheer stubborn refusal to die. The 671 is a two-stroke. It does not sound like any other diesel you have ever heard. It does not idle so much as it sings, a hard mechanical scream that old-timers either love or cannot stand. There is no in-between with a Jimmy. The Detroit was built for the military, for tugs, for landing craft, for buses and generators that had to run for days without stopping. It is about as mechanical as an engine can possibly be. There is no computer anywhere near it. You can rebuild one in a driveway with a manual and a set of sockets. And there is a whole army of men out there who know these engines cold because they ran them in the service. Parts are everywhere, and they are cheap. Now I promised you straight talk, so here is the catch. A 671 will drink more fuel than the softer-spoken engines on this list, and a worn one will mark its territory on the bilge with a little oil. That is the Detroit way, but it will run when everything else has quit. Folks have taken these across oceans and brought them home. It is loud, it is thirsty, and it is utterly, gloriously unkillable. For a certain kind of owner, that trade is no trade at all. Number 3. The John Deere Marine Diesel. The 4-cylinder 45 and the 6-cylinder 68. Here is the one that proves you do not have to chase a 40-year-old engine to get this kind of reliability, as long as you know which version to buy. John Deere has been building diesels for farmers for the better part of a century, and farmers are the most unforgiving customers on earth. A tractor cannot break down in the middle of a harvest. So Deere built engines that simply do not, and then they marinize them. The beauty of the John Deere is the dealer network. There is a green and yellow dealership in just about every rural county in the country. And that means parts and a mechanic who actually knows the engine are never far away. The mechanical versions of these motors give you everything we have been talking about: robust iron, slow, easy power, and a parts pipeline that runs through every farm town. You will find them repowered into older trawlers and fitted into newer ones. And either way, a well-kept John Deere is a 30-year engine. The only caution is the same one that runs through this whole video. Steer towards the mechanical versions and be very careful with the heavily electronic ones. And I will tell you exactly why when we get to the warnings. Now before I climb to the top 2, let me tip my cap to one engine I left off the main list on purpose, because most of you will never trip over one. The British Gardner. The Blue Water crowd only whispers about it. A Gardner turns so slow and runs so clean that it has been known to go 50,000 hours, and there are owners who will tell you, dead serious, that they have never once had the cylinder head off. 50,000 hours. It is the closest thing to a perpetual motion machine that anybody ever bolted into a boat. The only reason it is not on the main list is that they are rare as hen's teeth on this side of the water, and they were never cheap. But if you ever do find a tired old trawler with a Gardner in the bilge, You call me first. Before I give you the top 2, do me one favor. If this is the kind of straight talk you are not getting anywhere else, the kind nobody selling you a boat will ever say to your face, tap that subscribe button. I put one of these out every single week. No hype, no nonsense, just the stuff the salesman is praying you never figure out. The top 2 are where it gets serious. Number 2, the Cummins 6BT, the 5.9 liter. Now sit up straight because this is the one that ought to make every truck man in the room grin. The Cummins 6BT is the exact same engine family, the same iron block, that Cummins dropped into the Dodge Ram pickup from 1989 to 1998. The legendary first-generation Dodge Cummins, the motor that built that truck's entire reputation. Cast iron block, cast iron head, mechanical injection on the early ones, no computer to throw a tantrum, and a design so simple it has roughly 40% fewer parts than the petrol engines it bears. Somebody had the good sense to marinize that engine and bolt it into trawlers, and you will find it in Monk 36s and a whole range of boats from that era. Think about what that means for you. While the man with the brand new boat is waiting 3 weeks for a factory technician to drive out with a special laptop just to read why his engine will not start, the Cummins owner is out in his slip changing his own oil on a Saturday, using the exact same know-how he already trusts under the bonnet of his pickup. The 6BT does not turn fast, it does not run hot, and it just will not quit. Parts are on the shelf at every truck shop in the land. That is a forever engine with a truckman's instruction manual. And that brings us to number 1. The engine I would build a boat purchase around before I had so much as glanced at the hull. The Ford Lehman 120. If these engines had a Hall of Fame, the Ford Lehman would be the one with the bronze plaque by the door. It was built off an industrial Ford block, the kind of motor designed to run a generator or a piece of farm equipment for decades on end without a single complaint. It is naturally aspirated, so there is no turbo waiting to blow. It is fully mechanical, so there is not one sensor to chase down at the worst possible moment. And it turns slow and easy at trawler speed. Here is the number that ends the argument. Run a Ford Lehman gently, the way a trawler is meant to be run, and that engine is good for somewhere between 12 and 14,000 hours before it even begins to think about a major overhaul. Stop and let that land. Nobody puts that many hours on a pleasure boat in one lifetime. There are Lehmans out there with the kind of running time that would wear out 3 trucks, and they have never once left a man stranded. It gets better. The oil filter on a Lehman cross-references to a common part that fits half the trucks built in this country. You buy it off the shelf for a few dollars. There was a diesel man who ran a school where ordinary boat owners, not mechanics, tore a Lehman all the way down to the bare block and bolted it back together over a single weekend, then fired it up and ran it. That tells you everything you need to know about how simple this engine is. There are only a handful of things on it that ever wear: the raw water pump, the coolant pump, the injection pump, and that cast iron exhaust elbow, which rots from the inside out, so you pull it and look at it every few years and swap it before it ever cooks the engine. Do those few small things on schedule, and the motor genuinely outlives the man who owns it. The outfits that specialize in these engines still make fresh parts today, so you are never picking through a junkyard for a 30-year-old casting. That is why the Ford Lehman 120 sits at number 1, and it is not even close. Now, take a breath, because we're about to walk to the other end of the dock. Those were the 5 that will outlive you. Here are the 2 that will not. The 2 that look just as good in the listing photos and will take you to the cleaners. The first one is an old engine that simply went wrong, and its name is the Detroit Diesel 8.2 liter. They called it the fuel pincher, And the boys who had to live with one came up with other names I will not say on this channel. Here is the trap. It carries the Detroit diesel name, the same proud name as that bulletproof 671 we just praised, so a buyer sees the badge and assumes he is getting the same legendary iron. He is not. The 8.2 was Detroit's attempt to build a lighter, cheaper, more modern motor, and in chasing light and cheap, they lost the very thing that made the old Detroits immortal. These engines earned a hard reputation for cracked blocks, for head gasket trouble, for problems that turn into a full repower in a hurry. Some of them ran fine, sure, but when you are betting your retirement on an engine, you do not want the one where the good copies are the exception. You want the one where there are no bad copies. So when you lift that hatch and see 8.2 stamped on the block, you smile politely and you keep walking. The second one is not a single engine at all. It is an entire philosophy, and it is the one most likely to catch a modern buyer. It is the high-output, turbocharged, common rail electronic diesel, the kind that has come into the newer boats and the repowers, very often bolted to a pair of pod drives under the stern. Now I want to be fair. These engines are smooth, they are quiet, they are clean, and when they are running right, they are a genuine pleasure. But go back to our 3 rules and watch them break every single one. They have a turbo, sometimes 2. They are run by a computer full of sensors that will not let the engine start if it does not like what one of them is telling it. And they are tuned to make big power out of a small block, which means they work hard and run hot for a living. Here is what that costs you in the real world. When a sensor fails, and on a 20-year-old electronic engine it will, the boat does not run and you cannot fix it with a screwdriver. You need a technician with the right laptop and the right software, and on an older engine that the manufacturer has long moved on from, that man can be very hard to find and very expensive when you do find him. A common rail injector is not a few dollars off the shelf, it is a serious bill, times however many cylinders you have got. And those pod drives hanging out under the boat, exposed below the waterline, turn a simple grounding that an old full-keel trawler would shrug off into a haul-out and a 5-figure repair. That is the engine the broker in the clean polo shirt steers you towards, because it photographs beautifully and it has that new boat smell. It is also the engine most likely to be sitting in a yard waiting on a part while the slip fees keep right on coming. So how do you tell them apart standing on the dock before you ever hand anybody a check? It comes down to a short list, and you can run it yourself. First, lift the hatch and look for a turbocharger and a tangle of electrical wiring. Lots of wires and a turbo, slow down. A bare, simple engine you can walk a full circle around, lean in closer. Second, find the engine plate and read the model. Then go home and spend an evening online learning what that exact engine is known for. The good ones have a fan club. The bad ones have a graveyard of horror stories, and both are easy to find. Third, ask for the hours and the maintenance records. An engine with a binder full of receipts and oil changes logged every season is telling you it was loved. An engine with no paperwork and a vague story is telling you something too. Fourth, and this is the one nobody skips if they are smart, pay for an oil analysis. For the price of a nice dinner, a lab will tell you from a few drops of oil whether there is metal wearing off inside that engine, whether coolant is sneaking into places it should not, and roughly how much life is left. That little test has saved more retirements than any survey line ever written. And then, do the one thing the frenzy buyers always skip. Sea trial the boat with the engine worked hard, not idling pretty at the dock. An engine can idle sweet as a kitten for 10 minutes and still cook itself the first time you load it up for a real run. Take it out, push it, let it get hot, and watch the gauges the whole way. That is where the truth comes out. Because here is the thread running through every one of these boats. It was never the brand on the side that decided whether you got a friend or a money pit. It was never the teak in the saloon. It was the lump of iron in the bilge. And whether it was the kind of honest, simple, slow-turning engine a person could own with both eyes open and both hands free, or the kind that was built to keep you locked out and writing checks. The 5 I showed you, the Perkins, the Detroit 671, the John Deere, the Cummins 6BT, and that old king, the Ford Lehman, were every one of them built by people who simply assumed you would want to fix your own boat someday. They came along before the industry decided that a sealed-up engine room and a computer move more boats off the showroom floor. The 2 I warned you about are what happens when light, cheap, and complicated win out over simple and strong. So before you write a check on any trawler at any dock, get down on your knees, lift that hatch, and meet the engine first. Read the plate, run the oil, walk the circle. The hull holds the water out, but the engine is the whole reason you can untie the lines in the first place. And it is the one part that will either carry you for 30 years or empty your bank account in 2. If you got something out of this, do me that favor and hit subscribe, because I run one of these down every week. And then tell me in the comments. Number 1, what engine is sitting in your boat right now and how many hours are on it? Number 2, are you a naturally aspirated man, or do you trust a modern turbo to do you right? And number 3, what is the highest hour Ford Lehman or Perkins you have ever personally laid eyes on? Drop it down below. I read every single one, and I will see you in the next one.